推進委員会白岩学園3年 B 組の皆さん、こんにちは。
はい、こんにちは。
今日皆さんは幸運にも今年度バトルロワイヤルの大賞クラスに選ばれました。おめでとうございます。
ありがとうございます。
ではこれからお姉さんがルールについて説明します。よく聞いて正しく元気に戦ってくださいね。今皆さんが来ている場所はこんな形をした無人島です。周囲は10キロぐらいで、住民の人には出て行ってもらって誰もいません。
よし、飛行してんじゃね
Hello and welcome to the easternKicks podcast, a regular magazine program about East Asian film led by me, Andrew Heskins, founder and grandmaster of easternKicks.com, and James Mudge, our leading writer.
Hey-o.
Each episode we'll be taking a look at the latest films, news and festivals, often chatting to filmmakers and stars along the way. Hello and welcome to our latest show. This episode, we're taking a look back at one of the most famous and controversial examples of so-called Asian extreme cinema, Battle Royale. To celebrate the newly restored 4K UHD release from Arrow Video, coming just over 20 years on from its original release, and nearly 20 years on from its first UK release.
True.
Which I think might make quite a few of our listeners feel rather old. But as we console ourselves to that fact, let's get on to that important first question. What are you drinking this episode, James?
Well, I'm going to hold up the bottle and show you on the Zoom everything because it's quite fancy.
And that's good for radio, yes.
Yeah. But no, it's a handcrafted...
rhubarb and ginger gin.
Exactly, by Whitley Neal. So I've started getting into the gin. I mean, I will, originally say I was off it because it was a bit hipster and maybe not tip man's drink and everything. But I started sneaking back into it. So yeah, a nice purple bottle of rhubarb gin and 43%, stronger than your average. So very nice.
So I think the gin spike has gone now. It's not so hip.
Think so.
I think the next thing is probably...
Baijiu?
I think we're probably into the bourbons or something.
I don't think there's any danger of me becoming a bourbon man. How about, what are you on? What are you drinking, man?
So I'm on the Ampleforth Abbey beer,
Oh.
British Abbey beer.
Nice.
Again, a nice Dibel 7%.
7%? Very solid and respectable.
We can't let it slide below 5, can we?
It would be a damn disgrace.
人生はゲームです。この国はすっかりダメになってしまいました。そこで今日は皆さんにちょっと殺し合いをしてもらいます。バトルロワイヤル。
So on to Battle Royale, and
Yeah.
I think for a lot of our listeners, we probably don't need to go into a quick summary of the film.
No, not really. Wait.
But there may be some listeners who don't know it, or maybe there's some youngsters out there who haven't heard of it.
easternKicks young team.
It was a very famous film, famous for basically having a core idea of lots of high school kids being taken to an island and being told that they've all got to kill each other off so that they can survive, basically. They either kill each other and one of them survives or none of them survive. It's always been, or at least at that point, when it was released, it was very controversial. And I think we'll come back to that in it, as we talk about the film. But it's interesting, it originally came from a novel by Kushan Takame, and even that was delayed when it was originally submitted. So it was around for a few years before we managed to get it published. And then it was adapted. I think these things happened at the same time, but it was adapted into a manga.
Yeah, that's right.
And also adapted into the film that many of us know and love, by the very veteran director Kinji Fukasaku, with a screenplay by his son Kenta.
That's right. Yeah. I did read the book, but not until quite a long time after, because it's one of those things, I guess. which you wouldn't have had translated if it wasn't for the success of the film, probably. But
very rarely, all of those translations seem to come out of films being made out of them.
Yeah,
I remember all the Ringu.
Exactly. That's true.
I think it's quite interesting that from what I've read, and you'll be able to probably go into more detail about it, but there's a much more complex world that this the Battle Royale program, as it is known, comes out of. That there is, that in the book, it's an alternative history where Japan won World War II, but has become a fascistic state. And it's which sounds to me, I mean, without having read the book myself, but it does sound much more like Mamoru Oshii's Kerberos series.
Oh, okay, yeah,
the Jinro kind of, and that kind of imagining of the world, and some of the other things that he's also done, like which was another adaptation of a science fiction book, but the Skycrawlers also has some similar ideas going on in it as well. All of which is pretty much jettisoned for the actual film adaptation, which is probably the right thing to do because you don't need all that kind of background.
Well, I mean, I think it's the way it comes out in the book, as far as I remember, and I'll be honest, I haven't read it for a good 10 years or something, but I think the detail kind of comes out in the character stories because it's kind of divided up into different chapters, different characters and stuff. So I don't think it's that there's a sort of intro or this is separate chapters which are actually about the world and stuff like that. And I think it all kind of comes through quite gradually, everything like that through the stories, and that's kind of the main difference is there's just a lot more background detail for pretty much every character. I mean, it's a good like 600 or over 600 pages in English anyway. I have the old, I think it was Viz who published it when it first went back in 2003 or whenever, and it is a long book with a lot more detail about the characters. But it's and we'll talk more about why the film's good and everything. But it's one of those cases where they've done a really, really successful distillation of the key parts of the film, kind of partly inspired by the director's own experiences growing up and stuff as well, from what I've gathered from interviews. But it did come with a Stephen King quote on the cover as well, which I think pulled people in, but because it does have similarities with some of his stuff, like the Long Walk, which was, I think, was one of those Bachman books where he, for some reason, wrote some things under a different, under a pseudonym.
That's right.
Richard Bachman, even though everybody knew it was him. So fair enough. I'm not going to question Stephen King, but it's a good book. It's one that I wouldn't mind, dipping back into. Though I've never read the manga. I'm not really a manga guy, so I'm not as familiar with that. I don't know how faithful that is compared to the the film to the book. So it'd be interesting to know, I guess. But it was, in terms of the director, it's a pretty interesting project for such a veteran filmmaker to have taken on, because he'd been making films since the 60s and well known for his all those gangster ones he did.
Yes.
Battles Without Honor and Humanity.
Yeah.
if that's right. But there was all those ones that got released in box sets and DVDs in the UK. There was a sudden rush of these things getting released, probably because of the success of Battle Royale and stuff like Graveyard of Honor, Cops versus Thugs, stuff like that, Street Mobster, I think.
As well as, he did a sci-fi, quite a ambitious sci-fi back in, I think it was released in about 1980, Virus.
I've never seen it. It's one of those ones where I used to see like really shitty looking DVD copies of with like a photocopied cover.
And there were really bad copies of it, but it's because it was a lot of it was in English. There was lots of English actors in there and quite well-known stars. And the other problem with the versions that kept turning up was it was a greatly abridged version of it. So I think it's sort of one of those ones where you could, there was a 90-minute odd version of it that used to turn up, and actually it's closer. I think the original is closer to about 3 hours. So.
Wow. Okay, so that's that's massive.
Or something like that. I mean, I might be overestimating, but it was greatly abridged.
Wow. Okay.
Which didn't help it at all, and actually made quite a lot of it. As these things happen, not really make a lot of sense. But that was an unusual film, I think, from his filmography.
Okay.
Most of them were the sort of the gangstery films that he became best known for. But yeah, so there's something, I guess, about the we've touched on the controversy for the novel and stuff as well, but for kind of like an older veteran director, who'd been in the industry for like 40 years to take on what's quite, it's quite a sort of angry film
as well,
Yeah.
like in like a lot of ways, and with its kind of whether or not the theme is like the generational gap in Japan turning violent or not. It's kind of the thing you might have expected, like some young upstart director, to have taken on to make a name for themselves, because you could have just mined the controversy, basically, just made it. It is obviously a very violent film, but as we'll get into, I mean that's not really everything about the film. So having this kind of like director who who's done he has done violent stuff before, but his stuff is kind of like quite gritty. It's quite character driven. Even for what I remember of those Yakuza films, they were still quite socially grounded, as well as sort of being very good genre films. So very interesting choice for him to have taken this on, I think.
I mean, what's really great about it is that, and I think we all enjoyed this whole idea of just giving lethal weapons to 15-year-olds and letting all those hormone-fueled emotions just kind of well up. So there's kind of the little details of unrequited love, all this kind of and some of these aggressions coming out of being the kids who were ostracized for being a little bit weird, and those people getting their revenge. It was actually, as it was kind of scripted, it does pick up on all these ideas really, really well, and kind of explores them in a way that I think everyone can kind of relate to, kind of being from our school experiences, and I mean, this is where it does become controversial. Thank God that most of us didn't have guns to kind of carry out those emotions.
We had knives in Glasgow. It wasn't so much hormone fueled as buckfast fueled, but there you if they'd said it in Glasgow, it would have been a pretty different film. It would have just been called Friday Night. but absolutely, and you get so many parts in it which are when you've seen, especially if you go to some cinema screenings and stuff, where people are kind of laughing along at some of the stuff, like oh, you're so cool, or before they die saying I always like you. And stuff. But so it's kind of it's quite funny, these kind of weird sort of high school melodrama cliches, but at the same time it's actually, especially considering the number of characters they pack into it, it's surprisingly quite moving and quite tragic, all the way through, because going into the film that you're going to see, you're going to see whatever it is, I think it's 42 kids or something, you're going to see probably all of them, apart from maybe one or two, and you're going to see them die in one way or the other. So there is, this sense all the way through of doom, and and the way it sort of knocks off the characters as well is fairly. You get a few ones who stick out are going to be fairly key figures in there, but even when they start like forming off their little cliques and kind of reflecting the way they were in school, that's really you get the guys who are trying to fix up the bomb and stuff like that, and you get some of the girls and they're still keeping the lighthouse clean. Stuff like that. It's still really, really nice touches, and there's this.
It's the way they're written as well, because they actually, without there being a lot of dialogue. But I think part of this is the casting of some of the the characters. But they do feel like very recognisable characters, very very recognisable archetypes that that you start to care about. All of them, really. Even the very dangerous ones you actually kind of start to care about.
Absolutely, there's a great efficiency. I mean, just like say talking as a as a horror fan and stuff, like we're so used to seeing small characters who are basically in films because they're going to die pretty soon, and there's no effort into the writing at all. But this is so efficiently done, and even though some of the parts, like we've said, are either cliches or broad archetypes, it's really. It's written and sort of edited and pasted in such a way, the way it jumps between them all. It's so skillfully done that, as you say, you do actually come to, whether you like them or not, you come to sort of recognize and go with the characters as they're on their way to their deaths. But it's, I don't know, it's one of those things where it is a very violent film, and that's obviously going to be what sold it to people and stuff, but at the same time, in a weird way, it's not necessarily just like a body count film, even though it is a body count, because it literally counts the. Yeah, we get the daily updates and everything. But at the same, it's not just, and whether or not it is this social criticism layer, the melodrama parts of it are actually very strong, and the just the role of Kitano as the teacher. as well. It's such a kind of ambiguous, weird role that you actually get some of these, especially when you get in towards the end of the film and stuff. Some of his actions and stuff like that. It's not art house, but it is quite weird. Some of his behavior and stuff like that, and that gives the film like another slightly kind of unexpected element to it as well, which is great. Because it's very tense, especially first time you watch it.
Which is, also the casting of Kitano being a bit of an in-joke, really, because he was the lead in Takeshi's Castle, which I think came to the UK, but they edited Takeshi's bits out of it.
You told me we mentioned that in a previous podcast, which I'd never known about. Yeah, so
but it was basically about people being in some games, and I think it's kind of. Again, I never really saw it, but it was kind of the Japan version of it's a knockout, and we've got people competing, and so there is that little kind of sly little joke there about the casting. But his character, a lot of the characters, they have these actual quite genuine kind of complexities to them. That there are all coming out of different perspectives and home lives and whatever. I think that's the one thing I would say is that because their lives are reasonably normal, because it has cut out the whole kind of the more fantastical kind of background of the book, you do wonder quite where this is coming from. It's not really explained, and when you see the school and everybody in the bus, it all seems very, very normal. It doesn't seem like a futuristic world where the government's having to slam down on. I mean, that's the one criticism I might have, but as I said before, I can see why that was jettisoned to help propel the story along.
Yeah, but I guess on the other hand, as I say, I can't really remember that aspect of the novel quite so well, but it makes it even more shocking, I guess. When they're being gassed on the bus and everything at the start. Although you're right, it wouldn't have done anything bad about the film. It would have added a bit more depth about the general worldview. Although, it's not particularly needed, but it does take Battle Royale, the film, and maybe this is a benefit of doing it. It does take it slightly more into the realms of the absurd or the surreal, I guess, which maybe helps. It would probably be even more controversial or less controversial if it had kind of more of a sci-fi setting and everything, I guess. So you're right. It would be quite a different take on it if it's taking place in what's clearly a more fantastical sci-fi type of world, everything, which would have pushed it much more into social metaphor, I suppose. Whereas at the moment, and there is definitely social criticism and whatnot in there, but it's not really
definitely.
It's not, it's quite background, or it's quite subtle.
Yeah. In
that respect. So it would be interesting, and maybe again that's something which comes out in the manga, which I haven't read rather. So yeah.
It's a really solid film, but I think one of the key points was I think it did come at a really good time, particularly for Japanese cinema, but for Asian cinema in general. The beginning of the noughties, on the back of Ringu, on the back of Audition, all these other films that were coming across that were defining, if you like, Asia Extreme.
Asia Extreme, yes.
And it had a UK cinema release.
Yes,
and these things, it was quite an interesting and a really great time for Asian cinema.
Oh, it was. It really was, and that is exactly when I was getting into Asian cinema kind of in general. I mean, I was just a young gorehound at the time, and relatively young. Not young, but I'd seen stuff like obviously like the guinea pig films and stuff like that. But my knowledge of Asian cinema at that point was mainly sort of martial arts and kung fu stuff, and not even any great depth then and stuff. So, but as you say, like that whole period, man, seeing stuff like Ring, Audition and everything when they first came out, The Grudge coming out, Dark Water, even stuff like The Eye, everything like that was what a time that was to be alive. And some of these poor young listeners who are, tuning in, the young team and everything, they won't know what it was like to be able to go and see these great films in the cinema, because now, especially with the growth of the streaming and everything, that it's just not profitable really to throw these films into the cinema. And I think as well at that time, because the internet wasn't so I don't know, was the internet ever not popular? But you know what I mean? It's not like the same now. It's like anytime a film screens at a festival, we'll be accessing reviews, lots of stuff, all the time straight away in content. Whereas back then, even like 20 years ago, it wasn't quite as widespread. So I remember seeing like the trailer for Battle Royale online, and my access to information was quite limited until I actually saw the film, which made it even more jaw-dropping, first time I saw it. So it was a different world. It was a more innocent time. But I think something like Battle Royale, though, it definitely would have contributed for quite a significant number of people, kind of the generation, sort of getting into Asian cinema, or as you say, like the Asian extreme kind of angle as well. And you're totally right. That was kind of the whole birth of this concept of Asia extreme and everything.
Yeah, and then we had the sort of Korean
side
of things coming up after, and Park Chan-wook, Old Boy, and
true.
I mean, it was absolutely the right moment for it, and I think if that hadn't been the case, it wouldn't have been so internationally. I know it was very successful in Japan, but I don't know if it would have been anywhere near as internationally as successful as it became. Yeah,
I mean, apart from the US, where because of all the high school shootings and everything going on, all the time in the US, it wasn't a fit for the US market at all, and they were so worried about selling it.
It's just interesting because I think with hindsight you can look at it and you can say that actually if there's one thing that it's really not doing, it is glamorizing.
Absolutely,
it's completely the opposite.
It's not an exploitation film. In that regard, I think as I said, there's a sense of doom that these people are going to die and everything. It's not. None of it's kind of reveling in it. It's not like a hyper stylized film or anything like that in that respect. And although it's bloody and stuff, it's not kind of like lingering close-ups of bullet wounds type gory or anything like that. So absolutely.
It comes in two cuts, which I think now the extended version, as I remember it, was originally the special edition, which is probably a better name for it, and it's now been called the director's cut,
which isn't technically true because for a director had always said that the theatrical version was his version and it was his preferred version. Then the extended cut was with its whatever, it's like 8 minutes. It was more just like a bonus for fans, like an extra thing for people to see. Whereas I think director's cut, I don't know, that's probably a very long debate as to what director's cut really means because it gets thrown around a lot.
It did actually, I think it did get a release in Japan as theatrical as well.
Could have done. I mean, they had a 3D version as well.
Well, Japan, I mean, I haven't seen the 3D
I haven't
version.
either. I don't know if it made it out of Japan. I'm not sure. I'd be interested to see it.
So there was a point for about 10 years where, because of some of the controversy, that getting the rights in different territories was a problem.
Okay.
I think probably more so with the US as well. Problems there ahead of the 3D version, but I don't know. And it seems to have, the 3D version does definitely seem to have kind of disappeared. It's not on the new release.
No, and especially because Battle Royale still plays the cinemas a lot, for midnight screenings and stuff. So you'd think if the 3D version was available and was good, then some cinemas would have been screening and stuff. So maybe there was some rights issue about it, or the 3D was just terrible. I don't know.
The extended cut, I think, is actually one of those ones I'd say is not a bad version to watch.
Sure.
In terms of, I mean, it's adds a lot of basketball scenes and a couple of odd little bits that you kind of see during the film are added in their entirety at the end as a bit.
Yes,
of
I remember the ending bits
But it actually does allow the film, particularly at the beginning, to breathe a bit more as you're introduced to the characters. Just a little bit, that part takes longer, but it doesn't. It's not an insult to the original film at all. I mean, I think they improved. There was the famous goof, which I actually remember from the first time I saw it, where Takeshi Kitano's character pulls a knife that's just been struck into somebody's head, and you can see him pulling it out from further down, and they correct those things and improve some of the CGI here and there and all those kind of things. But
you're right. It's a nice. It's kind of a nice to have, and if you've only seen the theatrical, then you're not essentially missing a huge amount. But equally, if you see the extended cut, then there's nice things you'll pick up on there and everything. So it's very worth it's very worthwhile, and probably, I think it's a film with a high rewatchability anyway. So
definitely.
it's a good idea just to watch the extended version. Mainly because it doesn't suddenly drag it out to like another half an hour, or anything like that. So it's you've got nothing to lose by checking that out.
So let's chat about the legacy of the film and the impact that it had on on filmmakers, on the cast, and also some of the things that kind of definitely picked up on it. I mean, in terms of the cast, I think as we said, as I was saying before, that it there really were a lot of great young talents going in there. That for a lot of them, it really made them. A lot of people coming up from TV that hadn't necessarily had a lot of feature film experience. I mean, obviously the lead guy in there, Tatsuya Fujiwara, he went on to have a very big career and lots of films where quite similar things were going on. Geiji, the gambling film.
That's right. He's in the Rurouni Kenshin and stuff as well, wasn't he? Death Note.
Yeah, Death Note, of course, and The Insight Mill. Lots of films.
Oh, The Insight Mill. I forgot that. I can see why I forgot it.
I mean, as an actor, he just seemed to be in everything at one point.
That's true.
He's great in Battle Royale.
Because
I think he's one of those actors who's very good at reacting to stuff, and he's got a very kind of especially at that point, he looks so young and pretty. He's very good at reacting to things with his big eyes and
fresh faced.
It kind of reminds me a bit of sort of David Cassidy in the 70s, but he's as the lead star, and particularly where he's kind of playing these roles where he's a bit more devious, he's just not as convincing. And I just
he doesn't really look evil. That's true.
He just didn't work for him. But
because he was the bad guy, or he was one of the villains in the Rurouni Kenshin. I think I remember.
Yeah.
And you're right. He just seems like a quite likable, affable young chap and stuff. He was a perfect fit for Shuya in Battle Royale. Really good as well. So. And
then you've got Aki Maeda, who was a singer, and she was in some of the Gamera films, and in Linda as well with Beiduna.
Ah, yes.
And again she'd done a lot of TV work. Chiaki Guriyama, who had been in the video version of Ju-on.
Yes.
And then we kind of get onto some of the influence of Battle Royale. But I think Quentin Tarantino very famously loved Battle Royale. and we talked about it. So he cast her in Kill Bill Volume 1, very much a similar role, with sort of a little ice picky type weapon. She was in Blade of the Immortal.
Oh yes.
And then you've got Gu Jibiashiki, who's a bit younger in Tokyo. Well, about the same year as Battle Royale. She's in the Hong Kong film Tokyo Raiders.
Oh yes. Jingle
and in One Missed Call and Memories of Matsuko, and eventually starring alongside Keanu Reeves in 47 Ronin.
Right. Okay.
Lots of actually. So I think you could put a. I mean, I know they went into a very long auditioning process. Getting hundreds of actors to do it, but she really picked up on some up and coming stars to be in this. It paid off for the film and for those guys as well. And then in terms of the influence of Battle Royale, we have the elephant in the room, which is of course this Hunger Games.
The Hungry Games, yeah.
The Hungry Games.
But yeah, absolutely. There was all that chat about the similarities, and again, I haven't read the books and stuff, but it was another one where the writer came out and I've never heard of Battle Royale. What is this Battle Royale you speak of? And, honestly, which I don't know. I mean, Battle Royale, it's not. You've got like Lord of Flies in there, but like Most Dangerous Game. There's other stuff.
Yeah, there are lots of things that it came from, definitely.
Yeah, but with the Hunger Games does seem fairly reasonably on the nose, and even just in taking the key concept of like. Kids pitted against each other, so it's kind of slightly hard to believe that there isn't. I mean, if it's influenced by it, doesn't even really matter. It's kind of interesting because of the denial and everything.
I think it always makes it worse.
Absolutely, because it's no one's really going to believe it in that respect. It's not that we even care, but absolutely, it's hard to think one way or the other that the Hunger Games books and films and stuff wouldn't have kind of come out and been so popular, because they were looking to to remake Battle Royale in the US.
For a long time, I think.
Yeah, they bought the
still
rights
kind
for it.
in production, which would never probably come out of
No, which is probably good. But but at the same time, maybe again being cynical, seeing like the failure to actually do a remake of it properly and stuff. So, somebody just figured, okay, great. Well, we know we can we'll do it young adult style properly, and we'll just take out the violence, and this is how you do it. So, but yeah, lots of other films you can say are influenced by the whole, battle royale concept.
Yeah. I mean, like both in Japan, where you've got films like the Gantz series as well.
Yeah.
But also I kind of feel like films like, and now that's a franchise as well. The Purge kind of has a bit of this idea of keeping kind of the core concept of keeping the population under control. Battle Royale is about scaring the shit out of them. By the Purge is by letting them do what they want for a night, and then it's kind of the same ideas that there's this kind of chaotic underbelly that needs some kind of release or some kind of some
Roman
kind of
gladiatorial style. Yeah, I know what you mean. Sure. Yeah. Could be. And then I guess slightly more direct ones like did you see the Belko experiment? Which is pretty good. But the fellow who did like Wolf Creek and stuff, where it's basically they're again trapped in a building and office workers and I don't remember the exact details, but yeah, they basically have to kill all of them have to kill each other for like one of them to survive. So it's pretty on the nose, but it's a pretty good film.
And it was what the was it Series 7 contender as well? It's done a sort of
yeah, great film. I remember
like a
calling
reality
a sick
TV
day,
version.
Called a sick day from work once to go and watch that back in. That's a good. Yeah, I want to see that again. It's good, sort of mix of like it is really on the nose with the reality show concept, and it's kind of a different use of the found footage, and I love found footage stuff. Okay, that's immediately jumping to the list of ones where I have to start digging through my boxes of DVDs to try and find a good film. But you're right. There's a lot of films which either are directly influenced or just in general, because it has.
Because it was so. I mean, the thing is, again, we come back to the point. It was really massive. It was,
yeah.
Everybody knew about the film. Which is again, it's incredibly. Now it is. We're back to it being very rare. But that at that point with the, we had the long-haired ladies coming out of the televisions and
crawling around
young kids with AK-47s. It's
and there will. I guess it's possibly fair as well to say. The whole like. There was all the T-shirts and posters and stuff, sort of focusing slightly on the school uniform angle as well, which for better or worse is still one of those things. A lot of fans, film fans or anime fans and stuff will still associate with Japan. The sort of high school uniform type stuff, everything. So there was a lot of sort of very strong sort of key imagery from the film, which was getting out there. Somebody. A young girl in a high school uniform with a gun, that type of stuff. For better or worse, which is another reason it did sort of soak into the public consciousness and everything, and the media and the coverage. But you're 100% right. It's hard to imagine too many films now getting that level of coverage, unless genre films. If it's like a Cannes winner or something big, like Parasite, that's a different thing. But for genre films, hard to imagine that kind of happening these days with anything. Unfortunately,
嫌なやつだと思うかもしれないけど、他のみんなが怖いもん。
これだけは覚えとけ。みんな必死になって戦って生き残る価値のある大人になりましょう。
And then we come to the other legacy of the film, which is the sequel.
Yes.
Battle Royale II. Requiem.
Yes. Yeah, Requiem. It's a sad story anyway, just with him, passing away,
And I think he'd only, as I've read it, he'd only actually just done one scene with Takeshi Kitano. And they'd done location scouting or whatever. And then his son, who was also writing the script for that, Kinji Fukasaku, picks up the reins as director. And I think, was that his first?
Yeah, it was his
film?
debut, which must have been a huge. Yeah, well, I mean, this is one of those things. Like, we'll talk more on film now, but overall, like, I mean, for me anyway, the colossal failure of the film. It's kind of feel a bit harsh to completely blame him because, you know, first time director, your dad's just died. You know, here's a gigantic, big budget, you know, film which has got controversy on it. It's got weight of expectation on it. You've got fans around the world. I mean, it's a hell of a job to give to, you know, a first time. He was a proper first time director. It wasn't like he'd done a bunch of like other stuff before, and then this was his first film. He, like you say, he was a screenwriter and stuff. So that's, you know, even just like trying to, I don't know, pay respect to his father's vision. I mean, as you say, like, you know, his father had been planning it and working on it and stuff. So it must have been a heavy time, you know, to actually take that on. So I you know, don't like the film, but I find it hard
Should we
him.
try and sum up the plot as best we can? It's a bit of a tough one, isn't it? Really. So,
well, I mean, what we can certainly
it's
say,
BR2, the BR2 program. So
it doesn't make any sense. But the trailer sold
so
it.
much of it doesn't make any sense.
No, it makes any damn sense.
Yeah.
But the trailer sold it as basically Saving Private Ryan with kids instead, and that was kind of the one sort of big beach scene. But it's just, yes, it takes place just like a few years after the first film. An old Shuya is now leading up a terrorist group called Wild Seven, I believe. Which I always
a bit
get
like the Wild Stallions. For some
well, I get it
reason,
confused
but
with this Japanese cigarette brand, which I went to Japan a bunch of times in the early 2000s, and I was stupid enough to smoke them. Anyway, but yeah, he's heading up this terrorist organization, and he looks quite. He looks like he's still fresh faced, but he's quite chubby. In Battle Royale II, he looks like life has been quite good. I mean, that's what he looks. He's a man on the run. But they've very clever. They're doing all these bombings in Tokyo and stuff like that, killing a lot of people, declaring war on the adults. But they've chosen a not very secret hideout on an island where everybody seems to know where it is. So
and it seems that the military can affect different zones in there, and they could have just bombed it straight away if that's what they wanted to do. But said they bizarrely send in a bunch of school kids. Why not? Yeah, gassed on a bus and randomly picked up. And this time they're from a real kind of, the whole school is a bit of a loser school.
Yeah, that's right.
And it's this weird thing where Kitano's daughter.
Right. Yeah.
Which is what's quite interesting actually, that it's played by Ai Maeda, who is the sister of Aki Maeda from the first film.
I didn't know that. Okay, cool.
And that's quite a nice little kind of in-joke, because there is this fascination with. He obviously has the Kitano character has a fascination with the Aki Maeda character.
Yeah.
And presumably kind of reminds him of his own daughter. So then they kind of write in this one that she's got the painting that he has, and it looks just like, and she finds out it's not of her, but it's of this other girl. Yeah, you know. But actually, to have her being played by the sister is quite a nice little.
I didn't know that. That is a nice touch. Yeah.
But one that's really probably pretty much lost in the film, because I don't understand. So she is able to apply to be a part of the BR2 program,
the secret BR2 program,
where she somehow manages to be picked up randomly as a transfer student. But it's like, is it planned? Is it? I don't. Oh, you've lost me now. Yeah. These guys get sent out, and this time. They're sent in to get the terrorists from this island that everybody knows where it is. Even the Americans, but we'll come on to that
Americans, yes.
And for some reason, they've got 42 of them. They've got the special collars on again, where they'll get blown up. But this time, they've paired up the boys and girls. Each one is... and if one of them dies, the other one dies.
That's just...
Or if one of them gets 50 metres away from them. It's like... Why would you try and deplete your forces that you're trying to? None of it, absolutely, none of it.
I think the pairing thing is the worst.
A lick of sense.
I mean, there's a lot of other things which are stupid, but the pairing thing is there's just zero logic whatsoever. Like you say, it's like whether or not they actually think the kids are going to manage to kill Shuya is another thing. Because I mean, you know, kids killing each other in Battle Royale, it makes sense in kind of a sick way. Giving kids military weapons they probably don't even have to fire them. What to do with them? How are they going to kill so-called hardened, chubby terrorists? Shuya, what are they going to do? So then, as you said, then cut your chances in half by making sure. So you've got this one who's about to kill poor old Shuya. Maybe, I mean, this isn't in the films. You're about to kill him. And suddenly notices the other one's dying in the corner, and it's like, no, none of it makes it doesn't make a lick of sense. And the pairing thing actually really annoyed me. I have to say, but it's a stupid thing.
And
among
the
many
characters,
stupid things.
because it doesn't. There's a couple of backstories chucked in almost like they're trying to kind of echo the original film.
Yeah.
Rather than do anything particularly with it. But there really is no attempt to kind of make these characters anything more than literal canon for them.
Yeah, absolutely. None of them are interesting or likable at all.
I think that's, that loses one of the best, as we talked about, is the best parts of Battle Royale. Is that there are, these are very real characters. They are, kids, all these archetypes that we grew up with.
Yeah.
Really, doesn't really explore that at all. You can't really understand what the hell they were thinking in making this. So they're all sent in by this. Again, we're back to having a teacher.
Yeah.
Who Riki Takeuchi.
Oh my god, his performance.
And that's and I don't understand what's going on with that characterization. He's chewing pills.
I don't even know what to say. It's just the first time I saw it, and obviously I watched it again for this podcast because we do our prep, but it's just his performance in this film is one of the weirdest things. It's just half the time he's just putting his two arms in front of him, going like Battle Royale, and his eyes are only vaguely open, and he's dressed in his rugby uniform and shiting on about rugby and stuff. It's just the first time I saw it, I thought it was just weird. The second time when I watched it again, it's a horrible performance. It's so grating every time, especially compared to Kitano.
Yeah, and it's it seems so out of even for the over topness of this. It seems so out of place. Even with the some of his parts in the Dead or Alive series.
They're crazy films. It kind of fits that, but this is just why I don't.
There's a cameo by Sonny Chiba, who seems to be the mentor for.
That's right.
Tetsuo Fujiwara's character.
Yeah, that's right. But
which is a nice little touch, but they're so briefly that you hardly even pick up on it. It's kind of lost in the. You're lost in the
stupidity,
the dust and debris of the crashing building, and that's kind of one of the most problematic parts of this. Is that it's very much, and it's one of the first scenes you see is of a whole lot of skyscrapers.
Yes, that's
coming down.
Yeah,
and it is very much sort of post 9/11 kind of and in quite an interesting way. I think in terms of reading the audience. What side it comes down, and it just wasn't the right time for it, and it's very clunkily done. But it is actually quite sympathetic in terms of terrorists and the background that they're coming from.
Well, it's fairly, it's fairly outspoken in that regard, sort of.
And then basically. Very much kind of and really demonizing the Americans throughout. The US is
which is, and I mean, to be honest, as you say. The main thing is it's just so badly handled. I mean, there's. I'm not saying there's something to be said for it in a sympathetic way, but I'm saying, in film you could have explored that, in some more interesting or proper way. But this film just so ham-fisted about it. It's ridiculous, and it doesn't.
And it wouldn't fit with the if the first film had stuck with the actual book. With that.
Well, that's true. That's true as well. But it just doesn't. Here, it just seems to be thrown in for like shock tactics or just. I mean, there's nothing wrong with having a jab at the Americans, Team America type style. Everything that's fine. Many films have done it in a good way. I mean, there's no harm in having, painting any government of any country around the world in a bad light, but. This is just—it's not even satire. It's so clumsy. It's just doesn't work at all. And it just, as a result, it comes across as being fairly bad taste. Which, as we said, the original Battle Royale was never like a cheap exploitation film. Whereas that aspect of this one just sticks out. It just doesn't work.
And it's so very long. Particularly, this film does come with two cuts. So the first one was
133. 133 minutes, I think.
Yeah, 2 hours 30 minutes, and then they extended it out.
My god, another 19 minutes, and just Oh, just why? I mean, the theatrical cut, the 1:33 is far too long, and then adding 19 minutes, and just because you do add a bit more action, add a bit more gore. You don't, because the characters are so are completely. You don't care about any of them. You don't really even notice it, and adding a bit more story to it. Well, you could have added more story, but you just cut some other stuff out. Then the director's cut should have been shorter, if anything. But it's hard to get through. Because they called it it's Revenge instead of Requiem, so I'm not sure why, but doesn't work. Never needed that, didn't work, and it's a shame because he's not turned out to be a terrible director. He hasn't made too much stuff, but he did X-Cross, which
I really enjoyed.
Yeah, it's a good horror.
As a genre film, it's just a fantastic.
I totally agree.
Real kind of just goes for it.
Yeah. So he's not a bad filming, and Yo-Yo Cop Girl, which is quite fun as well. He's not done a huge amount, but as I say, I guess his dad just passed away, and taking this on as a first time director must have been crazy. Actually trying to do it. So I really don't like Battle Royale 2. Having watched it when I saw it the first time when it first came out, I was not so against. I was disappointed, definitely, but. When I rewatched it again, and I did watch the long version, unfortunately, sadly, no, it's not aged well, and partly because of, as we said, like the very overt political side of it is so badly done that's aged even worse than the first time you saw it, so it's a shame. It really is a shame, but it's not like the film needed a sequel. No, but we'll never know what the original, if the original director had made it if he hadn't sadly passed away, but that'll be. Something we'll never know, I guess. And I don't see a Battle Royale 3 ever coming. They'll probably get a weird remake or something in the same way they keep churning out Sadakos and stuff at some point, like in Japan, and they'll probably just redo it with a different, younger cast. Well, I don't think it'll catch the zeitgeist the way the first one ever did. So
no,
I would be very.
I think.
Surprised.
I mean, again, in part, it's just the way we kind of consume films now.
I think
unless something is the box set that everyone's watching, we're all watching things at separate times, separate. It's no longer do we have the water cooler moment. Not that you or I have the water cooler moment anyway, because we don't work in an office.
But we have the Bo Bells moment where we're down in the pub.
We have the Bo Bells moment. But yeah, we've been seriously lacking the water cooler moments in general.
Oh, it's been it's been too long, and soon. Let's hope. But I completely agree, and I think even before, like, it's not like a day and date world back then when it came out, where something would be released everywhere at the same time, and as I said, with the internet not being as big or whatever, I'm sure it was the same size, but without it being as widespread,
it's bigger. That's the problem.
It's grown now. Now it's the size of Idaho. But it's just the way the old word of mouth worked so differently back in those good old days. So now, it's the kind of thing, like if they did another version of it now, then we'd know about it from development. We'd probably see this, the before, the prepped photos. We'd know about the cast. We'd know we'd know absolutely everything. It's not going to make it a bad film, but it'll just be a bad film because it'll probably be a bad film. But it's just that we would know everything. There'd be no surprise. So. Which is, better or worse. Joking aside, like, it's just a different era than it was 20 years ago. But you're right. I think Battle Royale.
And we were lads.
We were youngsters and everything, like, still boozing it up, because now we don't booze it up. Wait. But now we like a nice quiet boozer. We're not like some hip club. I don't know. I never liked that.
Battle Royale is released as a 5-disc set from Arrow Video on the 26th of April, including both cuts of the original film on UHD, both cuts of Battle Royale II on Blu-ray, and the soundtrack to the original film, and a hell of a lot of extras.
It's crazy how much stuff is on there. I mean, I'm not doing this as an advert for Arrow unless they want to send us some money, but no, just the sheer. I know, because this is a film which has had like a bunch of different releases, as we said, over the years, but the amount of extras and stuff on there is pretty staggering. As you say, the soundtrack, but just all these featurettes, interviews, festival premiere footage. It's crazy how much stuff is on there. I mean, Battle Royale is a film which I will always revisit stuff myself, and I've seen it on the big screen
and
a couple
it's
of
definitely
times, but it's
definitely worth revisiting.
But this must be the most there can't be anything left out there for a more comprehensive set after this. It's impressive. Even just reading the list of it, it makes it feel to me, not realistically, but it must be a very heavy and large like Blu-ray set. Everything
It's
like
got a
that.
poster in there and all.
Yeah. It's all kinds of mad packaging and stuff as well. So they've really a lot of work and love has gone into this. And fair play, man. I mean, I wouldn't know where to start with that stuff. How much is on there, but yeah, I just mean that I can't ever seeing there being a more comprehensive edition. This must be kind of even when you got to a 30 years anniversary or something. There's not much more you could drag out apart from shooting new interviews with folk and stuff. So if you like Battle Royale, or if for any reason that you've never seen it, then yeah, there's no reason not to go for this one, really.
ごめんな。俺が殺しちゃ反則だよな。
バトルロワイヤル残り41人12月16日ロードショー
And now it's time for our Eastern Kicks picks, and don't you found a few things that we should be interested in?
Yeah, I mean, unsurprisingly, there's been a fairly steady stream of content, especially like during the lockdown and everything, which it's going to be interesting to see how much that continues over the next 12 months. And we're starting to see more Chinese films, mainland films, like finally getting picked up for Netflix. And we've got the 2 versions of the Yin Yang Master. Neither of which I enjoyed. There you go. But they're on there, so and they are.
So are they they're different films? Are they actually both called the Yin Yang?
One of them's slightly different spelling, and one of them is called like the Dream of Eternity. So, but they're not. It's not terrible. They're neither of them's terrible. They're just very middle of the road sort of Chinese fantasy ones, which are not as good as other ones and stuff. Like, I mean, I saw that Writer's Odyssey recently, which is not on Netflix, but that was actually very good. The Chinese one, sadly, didn't get a release here in the UK because of the cinemas and stuff. But that's a cool film. But I think the best one I've seen on Netflix, and probably one of the biggest kind of scores they've had, is Park Hoon-jung, the Korean guy who did stuff like New World, Tiger, The Unjust, screenplay. I Saw the Devil.
Yeah, he was a screenwriter turned director. He's a nice guy. I remember interviewing him quite a few years ago now.
Oh, very nice.
Around the time that New World was screened
because he did The Witch, didn't he? Or The Witch Part 1 Subversion, which we've mentioned before, because hasn't been a Witch Part 2.
There was talk that it's coming now.
There was talk it's coming. Hopefully, it's a fantastic. That was a great. We've definitely talked about that before. It's a fantastic film, The Witch Part 1. But his latest one, Night in Paradise, is on Netflix, which was it was at Venice and stuff like that last year, and gone straight to Netflix. And it's honestly, like, if I tell you the premise, it's not going to sound good to you. I'm gonna tell you, of course, it's some gangster, or who's kind of a thug for one of the mob bosses and stuff like that. He does something like against one of the other mob bosses, and he has to go and hide out on an island, and he's all very moody and stuff, and he meets a girl who's also very, very moody and stuff like that, and then a lot of stuff happens. So it doesn't sound very promising, but it's a great film. I was surprised at how much I enjoyed it. It's hyper violent as well. It is weird because it has a plot, but the plot, possibly because it's essentially a very disposable plot. It's almost like you get these like scene like, okay, he's getting to the end, he's meeting her, which kind of progresses quite normally, but there's a weird kind of poetic sense to it as well. It's quite moody, but it's so violent. It's quite honestly, it's one of those films where I think about reviewing it as one of my regular weekly Eastern Kicks Extremes comic. It's so bloody, it's so stabby, it's just stabby all the way through. It's incredibly violent, but It's if anything, it's similar to like A Bittersweet Life and stuff, because there's not much chat from the guy, Umtego, with apologies for pronunciation, the main actor, he's very good in it and stuff as well. So it's a really surprisingly good film for something which sounds completely generic. And honestly, even if I tell you it is 131 minutes long, it's classic Korean length, 2 hours 10 minutes. Honestly, it doesn't feel it. It doesn't outstay its welcome. Probably because the plot is just standard, but it kind of misses out these filler bits where you have pointless scenes of somebody crying or something like that between there's not like a comedy sidekick or anything like that. So it kind of takes these things and distills it down to something a lot more efficient. And he keeps making similar stuff, Park Hoon-jung with New World and stuff. But this is the Korean film I've enjoyed the most, probably. Well, this year anyways. I haven't seen many Korean films this year, but on Netflix, no reason not to check it out. 100% recommended it. So I'm glad that one landed so quickly. And yeah, hopefully we'll see more of this. I mean, we've talked about the glories of the early 2000s with films coming to cinemas. So at least maybe more of these films will make it to it's a streaming now. Yeah. Especially if they're the good ones, which are, because for this one being one of the ones which has been into big festivals and stuff, that's slightly more unusual, I think, because these are the ones which might have looked for distribution, more proper releasing. So we'll see how that plays out after COVID. But yeah, I'm giving it my thumbs up.
So that's it for now. Don't forget you can find all our previous episodes on Apple, Amazon Music, Spotify, Google, or wherever you get your podcasts. Subscribe now and you'll never miss an episode. But for now,
cheers.